Disney classics, original shows, documentaries, and more, there's a new streaming service in town.
We're Andrea and Patty, and we are now streaming Disney+. Hey y'all, this is Patty from NoGuiltFangirl.com and No Guilt Fangirls Podcast. You can find me on all socials at No Guilt Life.
And I'm Andrea with ThemeParkParents.com. You can find me at Theme Park Parents on social or at Andrea Updike.
And we've got a really important show today. This one, I don't know, maybe people don't put a lot of thought into it, but we're going to talk about accessibility, and especially accessibility and the options that are coming to us with Disney+. And as our guest today, we have a guest. Andrea, is this our first guest?
I think this is our first guest, our inaugural Disney Plus guest.
This is so exciting. It also happens to be one of my favorite guests. If you have listened to the No Guilt Fangirls podcast at all, she's not going to be a stranger to you. Theresa Mabe is with us. Hey, Theresa.
Hello. And
you can find Theresa like all over the internet, but what she's known for in my world is entertaining me on Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah. We've been doing that for a long time.
We have. You can find her at Gertie the Dino on Twitter. And she also has a blog and, of course, Instagram. And go ahead and tell us where people can find you there, Theresa.
Yes. So like I said, I'm at Gertie the Dino on Twitter, but my blog and Instagram are Insightful Life. And it's all about making Disney style and entertainment accessible.
Okay. I mean, the perfect person to talk about this, I think, is Theresa. Andrea, do you know Theresa just from online? Have you ever met her?
I have not met her in person, but I am
was
familiar.
Thinking that, yes, yeah. we're very social online, but I don't think we've been face to face yet.
I know. We have to fix that.
Which is very surprising, given our circles.
I know. It's so true. There's a lot of overlap there.
You do. She's delightful, and you're delightful, and you guys would have a good time together if you ever met. But that does surprise me. But I had just that moment as I was talking this through. I was like, I don't even think they really know each other. So, all right.
No.
All right.
No, this is going to be a great show, and I'm really interested to hear your perspective because I always love your insight on insightful life on accessibility because I think it's such an important topic and not enough people are talking about it.
Well, and that makes me happy to hear because, like you said, not a lot of people talk about it, but I think in the back of their heads, they're aware it's something that they should be doing and maybe just don't know how or don't know how it plays into their lives or other people's lives. So I'm always very excited whenever anybody wants to hear me speak about it.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so quick overview. Theresa, can you tell us a little bit of what we're talking about when we say accessibility and what's your connection to it?
Sure. So accessibility ultimately is about inclusive design practices, and that's, creating or developing things to accommodate as many people as possible. I think one of the most common real world examples of it are the cutouts at crosswalks that you typically think of, it's for people in wheelchairs so they can get from the sidewalk down to the street and to the other side of the road. But it also benefits people who are on bikes or people who have strollers or really anything with wheels. Another recent example that I don't know if accessibility was in the back of their mind when they were designing this, but at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, the Coke bottles that they have now, they have them shaped, I think they call them shaped like detonators. And the caps, they have these little indents, and it actually makes that type of cap makes it a lot easier for somebody with arthritis or different mobility issues. They can actually grip onto it to open it better. So it's little design touches like that, it makes things easier for certain groups of people, but it doesn't limit other groups.
Well, I would pretty much guarantee that was not what they were thinking, but what an awesome bonus that ended. And now I know something. Who knew? I didn't know that. That really makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yes, it's one of the things as soon as I saw it, that's the first thing that popped in my mind. And I'm like, it's probably just for the design visual aspect, but they are really benefiting other people. So I'm not mad about it.
Hey,
Definitely.
Who knew?
Yes. And so my connection, how I got into accessibility was about 5.5 years ago. I was diagnosed with a degenerative retina condition, and it impacts my central vision. It's left me progressively with visual impairment. So at the time, I was in the middle of a degree in digital media and web technology. And so kind of as a result, I started gravitating towards all of the aspects of accessibility in digital design. And it's really sort of took off from there when I realized there weren't as many people speaking about this as there probably should be. And I would see things happening on social media or on websites and just kind of want to give a little feedback to people, say, maybe you could do this a little differently. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I started my website, where I started speaking about it on social media, doing Web Accessibility Wednesdays. And like I said, I think a lot of people are excited to include these things in their day-to-day lives. They maybe just, it doesn't occur to them all of the ways that they can make changes.
Absolutely not. I mean, as a blogger and someone who creates content on the internet, and I have for over a decade, probably a lot more than that, I always heard of using alt tags in your images. And to me, it was presented as a way to get more traffic, to be seen with your keywords in Google and to get people to come to your website. And it wasn't until a couple of years after I had learned the term alt tag that I learned it's actually to help visually impaired people know what the picture is. It's just supposed to be, a plate with a cookie and, and describing the actual image. And that blew my mind when I first learned that because I had no idea. And I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense. Why didn't anybody say that?
And there are ways, there's ways that the two, SEO and alt text, or in accessibility in general, they work together very, very closely. Usually if you're doing one well, the other is going to be doing well also.
Yes.
And it's something that I love to point out to people. And they're like, oh, that does make a lot of sense.
It does, doesn't it? Well, after spending time with you online and in person and kind of, it made me think about a few things too. And in fact, even with my podcast, I haven't done it a whole lot with the now streaming Disney Plus because I've just run out of a lot of time lately, I'll be honest. But I had started doing transcripts for the No Guilt Fangirls podcast. And the idea behind that, it was from an accessibility standpoint. They're not edited perfectly, but for somebody who maybe is hearing impaired, but still wants the content or still wants to have that discussion, they can read it, right? And so I'm dipping my toes in there, trying to pay attention to these things, which is why when I saw your blog post come out about what is happening with Disney Plus and the accessibility options, I was like, oh, Theresa, I'm booking you. You're coming on the show because we got to have this discussion. Yeah, no, absolutely. We got to talk about that. So, and we will link in the show notes. We're gonna link to the blog post that you have out that we're gonna refer to here. So if anybody's furiously going, wait, what's her blog again? Don't you worry, it's gonna be right there for you. You're gonna have easy access, clickable right over to it. Okay. So let's talk about the Disney Plus and what they're offering. What types of accessibility and can you explain a little bit of what they are for those of us who are learning about this topic?
I definitely can. So Disney Plus, it seems like they've split their accessibility into two groups, if we want to look at it that way. There's the accessibility of the platform itself and accessibility of the content that's going to be on the platform. So we'll do the platform itself because that's the entertainment part is the fun part. So we'll get to that at the end. But so they're doing things like text to speech, which is for people who are using screen readers or different assistive devices. It will, it'll read the titles, it'll read the menus that they're on. And this is something that I think they said nearly all of their platforms or any device that you're using will support it, except for PlayStation 4. I'm not sure what the alternative is going to be for that, if there will be one, but that's something to be aware of if all you have is PlayStation 4 and you would need the text-to-speech option. You may need to invest in another device.
It's good to know.
Another thing that they're doing that is important to me is they've taken color contrast into consideration. So one of the issues that I have is if a font color is too light on a background, I have trouble distinguishing between the two. So they've made sure that they are adhering to the web content accessibility guidelines to make sure that the color contrast meets, for people with low vision, meets those requirements. They're also having the platform is going to be fully keyboard navigational. And so that's for people, again, a lot of people who are visually impaired or blind, they don't use a mouse to click around because they can't tell where the mouse is. Or if people with different mobility issues, they'll use their keyboard to navigate. So they'll kind of be able to tab from one item to another.
Wow.
And they also, I think, in responsive design is the other area that they've said that they're going to make sure that it's designed to support screens of different sizes. So say if you're viewing it on a mobile phone versus on a TV screen, you'll still be able to get to all the different places that you need to. The size of the screen that you're using isn't going to impact your experience, other than maybe just not being able to see Ant-Man in his ant size versus his large size.
Oh, interesting.
That is so fascinating. I'd love to know a little bit more about the contrast thing. Like, how do you think, I mean, I know we haven't seen it yet, but how do you think that will work? Will you be able to set it once to your preferences, or?
I think for the general, I think it's if you've seen any of the testing that they've done or the interface that they have right now, where it's a dark background with light text, I think that that's what it's going to look like for everybody. But for when we talk about the content accessibility, closed captioning is an area that people can design it to look exactly how they want. So they'll be able to choose if they want like a light background versus a dark background, if they need a different font type, if they need larger text or smaller text. I think the general interface is going to look the same for everybody, but it's going to have been designed for people with low vision in mind.
That's so excellent. So it's not just for the menu, it'll be for the closed captioning within the shows and movies. Very cool. Very cool.
Well, that's really smart. And I don't know. Can you compare this to other apps and such out there? Like, I don't know, does Netflix have stuff set up for accessibility like this? I mean, I don't want to go too much on a tangent. I'm just curious.
And I was going to talk a little bit about all of it towards the end, but yes. So most of the streaming services are set up in different ways to be accessible. The Amazon Prime, their web interface is, I could think, less so than some of the others, but Amazon in general is not the most accessible website.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
They, like I said, but I think if you're using it, using the television or other streaming services, it's a little easier to navigate. But I think the area that'll be interesting to see how they differ is in terms of searching for the content that has different accessibility features. And that's something I was playing around with a little earlier, just to kind of make sure I knew what all the options were and kind of know what my preference is.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So what else?
So like I said, that's pretty much in terms of everything for the platform. For the actual content itself, there's 4 different things or 3 different things that they're doing. Closed captioning, like I mentioned, that's probably what most people think of if they think of an accessibility option for entertainment, because pretty much all streaming services, there was a lawsuit maybe 6 or 7 years ago that one of the services they went through, and it was basically because not all of their content had closed captioning. And so I think now that's pretty common on any streaming service. Almost anything that you want to bring up will have closed captioning. A lot of them will also have ways to adjust it a little bit. Some of them will have it in other languages, but I think that's something. Disney Plus has said that availability will vary based on title and by language. And so by that, I'm assuming that they might not have closed captioning, say in Spanish for all of their titles, or I would imagine that they'll have it for almost everything in English, but maybe not for the different languages. But most of my information about the content is coming from the beta test that they've had in the Netherlands. So it could also, in theory, change once the full launch is out too.
Yeah, and FYI, she's not in the Netherlands.
No, I know a few people who had access to it, so
yes, yes, and I noticed that you shared a really great list on your blog that's alphabetized, which I love, by the way, of the content that's currently there with the audio description, and I was fascinated by that. You shared a clip also in your blog post, and we'll link to that. But that I have never seen that in action, and I was so thankful that you shared it because it was really helpful for me. So if anyone is unfamiliar with this, head over to this blog post. We'll link to it because Theresa has really broken it down with some really good examples that if you need like something tangible to hold on to, I found it very helpful.
Yes, and so audio descriptions, that's what the post I did today was about. It's basically if you've ever listened to a commentary track over a piece of entertainment, it's similar to that, except they only speak during pauses in dialogue, so it's not overtaking any of the conversation that's happening, but it will basically describe what's happening on the screen to people who can't see it. So it'll do anything from character reactions that are nonverbal. It will describe the setting. If there's text on the screen, it will read that. So, all of the beginnings to all of the Star Wars films, it will read the,
the crawl.
Full crawl.
Well, that would be a wild job as an actor, too. Could you imagine, like, having to describe, say, something crazy that Jim Carrey's doing with his facial expressions or something to somebody?
Some of them are really funny. Like, I've listened to a few, and there was one I was watching something the other day, and I just wanted to kind of see what the audio description, or hear what the audio description sounded like. And they were saying it was in a mom group, and the one woman said something that everybody kind of gave her a look, and it was like, even the baby was skeptical. I kind of want to listen to these more often. Just like,
well, and it kind of reminds me in a way of like if you guys have seen the Disney nature films where they kind of give human qualities to animals on screen, and they're kind of putting these words in their mouths. I mean, it kind of reminded me of that. It's not just a dry reading of, there's a tree in the background, there's this. It's actually quite interactive and funny, and the little Frozen clip that you shared, I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to watch them like this. Like, it added to the story.
And they'll definitely play to the tone of the film itself. So, like I said, what you get for a Marvel movie is going to be very different than what you would have in Coco. I think they try to, and along with that, I think for the people who are doing the audio descriptions, they also try to match it to what the type of entertainment is. So it's going to be interesting to see for all of the Disney films, because Disney Nature, they actually have, I think there's 4 of the Disney Nature films do have the audio descriptions added. So especially since that already kind of plays into what those films are like, I'm curious to know how that adds to the experience.
Oh, totally. Interesting. All right. So what else? What else can you tell us about accessibility that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, and there's one more thing that they have included that they've announced that they'll be doing, and I think it falls on like the edge of accessibility. They have said that they're going to have photosensitivity warnings, particularly for any content that might contain flashing light sequences or patterns. And I know they had a big issue with that with Incredibles 2 once it came out.
Yep.
And when I saw that this was something that they were going to be adding into the streaming service, I really appreciated that, because it shows that, they're taking the audience feedback that they're getting in all these areas and then stopping to think, how can we apply this moving forward? So when they've said, before they listed what their accessibility options were, they did have a statement talking about how they want to be inclusive and make sure their content is enjoyable for everyone. And I think that's, a small part. We have all these other accessibility options and features that they're going to be including, but just they're taking the feedback that people are giving them and making sure they're incorporating it. And so I think that's them showing they're really trying to be inclusive and making sure that they're able to, reach as many people as possible.
I love that. And it's no small thing. I mean, everything you've described, I'm just seeing teams and teams of people doing it. It's not just like, oh, push a button, It's not like they're just saying, oh, yeah, sure, throw that in there. Like, they really do have to put thought into it and do it right, or else what's the point? Right.
And so we were kind of talking a little bit earlier about how Disney Plus might compare to some of the other streaming services. And so when I was looking through, I'm going to talk about, I guess, how you find, like I said, most content does have the closed captioning now, but audio descriptions are still touch and go. Like I said, the list that I was given, it has about 200 films on it, and I think that's maybe 1/3 of what Disney Plus has announced will be on at launch, which is more than I was expecting. 1/3, that's more than I was expecting. It's still not everything. In an ideal world, it would be. Right. This list, I'm saying it's an unofficial list because it does not include any of the new original content that's going to be there on launch day, because that's not available in the Netherlands yet. I think that there are some things missing, and I don't know if it's because the titles were missing from their beta test or if it's because they don't have it. I think one was Tarzan 2 has audio descriptions, but not the original Tarzan was not on my list. I would be surprised if, and it's not only that, newer films have it. I think the, original Cinderella is on there. The Absent-Minded Professor, I think, was one, like That Darn Cat. There's a lot of the classic Disney films. It's a very diverse range of entertainment that will have this available, whereas a lot of the other streaming services, it will just be their newer original shows.
Right.
I was looking, and I think...
So they don't go back. You haven't noticed, like, the older content on, say, Netflix having these things. They're just sort of adding them as they go.
It's inconsistent, and it generally is more common to have it on movies than on television series, which makes sense simply because of the volume. And that's why I would be surprised if, say, the Disney afternoon shows have it on there, because that's so much for them to go through at this point. And hopefully one day they will, but maybe not at launch, because if anything doesn't have it, they have to create it. And that does take time. And especially if somebody, I think writing audio descriptions is a skill that not many people have, because you need to make sure that it's concise enough to fit into these pauses, but also gives people what they need for it to make sense in context.
Dang, I'm like getting some ideas for new jobs that I hadn't even thought of.
I know.
I mean, that's an amazing point, is that would be a very skilled technique to be able to develop and to be able to do. And I can't help but think, especially with our aging society, people aren't dying at 65 anymore. They're living to their 90s. So there's going to be a lot more of us, getting older where our hearing is failing or our eyesight is failing, and that some of these accessibility needs, we may not have a diagnosis like yourself, but we're all going to get old, we hope, right? Knock on some wood somewhere. Yeah. That's my goal, is to get really, really old. But I still want my Disney in my life.
Right. Well, and I don't even need closed captioning. I still have it on almost any time I watch something. It just makes it easier for me to process. And I think I've just gotten so used to it now that if I don't have it, also, it's because I like to multitask, and it means I have to pay more attention.
We turn it on. I mean, there are certain movies or shows, like if we get really into a BBC show and they start talking fast, I'm like, all right, you got to turn on closed captioning because I cannot get through the accent.
I laugh so hard, guys. So my husband is a war veteran, and so he's got some hearing loss from that time there, which... What I'm laughing about is that because we live with our closed captions on all the time for the same reason. Otherwise, we have to jack everything up to, 100%, on the TV. So we almost always have the closed captions on so that he doesn't have to turn it up so loud. However, it's the same man that will like jump out of bed in the middle of the night because he heard a sound and he can hear, the kid's phone down the hall sending a text message through like 6 different doors so it's a very selective hearing loss.
Yes.
But it's just fascinating to me. But yeah, we are totally on board that whole, throw on the closed captions things. But I mean, it's just something to kind of keep in mind. And, all over the internet, there's calls for caption writers or for, people that have those kinds of skills. And I just never... Because I don't have the need for it at this time. Right. It hadn't crossed my mind to think about things that we take for granted as far as like watching these shows. And I love that we're having this discussion, and I love that Disney Plus is taking those steps. Like you said, like a third of their content, they're going there. They're getting it. They're making, they were heard, you guys were heard, and they're trying to make it accessible for everybody. And I love that. I love it.
Right. And I went so there's a website, I do want to shout them out there. It's the Audio Description Project, and they have compiled just a master list for every streaming service, and even for DVDs and movies that are in the theater that have audio descriptions available. And so I was looking at all of their titles, and for what I thought was really interesting was for everything that's there on Amazon, there were 90 titles in the kids and family section, and Netflix had about 200. And I want to say for Netflix, that's maybe like between 20 and 25% of all of their titles with audio descriptions. For Amazon, that's much, much lower percentage. But at least the benefit with Disney Plus, especially for parents of kids who have visual disabilities, I know there's the whole discussion of, not everything on there is going to be great for kids of all ages, but you have a much better chance now of being able to find a wide variety of content for them to watch and listen to. that other streaming
Absolutely.
services don't have at the moment.
Yeah, I think that is so smart. And again, I mean, it's for everyone, and that's what I love. They're not just singling out one accessibility issue or an age group or anything like that. It really seems like they're trying to take broad strokes and hit every aspect that they can, and hopefully it's a good sign of things to come that they will, expand and add even more content.
Right, and my hope for them right now on the different platforms, it's not incredibly easy to find which movies and series have audio descriptions on them. I think Hulu does have a category for it, but they also only have 50 titles in that category.
Right.
And for Netflix and Amazon, you can search audio description and it'll bring up a list, but there's no way to sort through that. I think on Amazon, they have it's the featured ones first, or you can sort by year.
Okay.
And with Netflix, it just puts it in order based on your other viewing preferences. So in theory, the things you would like to watch will be listed first. But
Would rise to the
there's no way, or like I said, that's why I do appreciate the audio description project, is because you can just kind of go through their list and find out right away what will have audio descriptions. Whereas on the platform itself, you just kind of either have to put something in and hope it has it, hope it's there, or just kind of hope it's one of the options that they show you without having to then scroll through everything. Because like I said, most people who are going to be using these audio descriptions, so they just kind of have to tab and listen to each one in order and wait to find something that they want to watch or try.
Yeah, that would be a good... I'm going to write an email because I feel like that would be a really simple categorization. I mean, we were just talking...
I haven't seen what... I think I asked the person who had access to it, and they said they did not see a way to filter it at the time, but that doesn't mean that they don't have it or that they won't have it. It just means that hopefully they'll do better than the other streaming platforms.
Yes. Definitely. Well, I mean, we were talking about it last week on the show that they have a category for movies with beasts in them. So, I feel like if they can narrow it down to something like that, certainly they could say, a list of accessible movies and shows are here, and they have the option that you can create your own watch list. But again, it's finding the episode. It's knowing which one to put in there. And you would think that they would want everyone to know that these are available.
Yes, so. And I mean, and you can, this is similar to other platforms where as soon as you choose that you want to have the audio description track play for one thing, that will transfer over to anything else that you watch. Same with once you set how you want your closed captions to look, it will stay that way across the platform. So you don't have to, if it doesn't have the audio description available for one, it will play the regular track. But then the next time you go to a film or a TV series that has it, it will play the audio description track. So it is nice that you don't have to, select it every time. But like I said, for some of them, people won't know until it starts playing whether or not, if it starts describing the castle or starts describing the Lucasfilm logo, they'll know right away. Yes, okay, we have audio descriptions. Otherwise,
we have liftoff.
Is there anything else that we're missing that you want to cover? Did we cover everything that sounds like it all? Did we get what we needed covered? Because I'm looking at the list and I feel like we touched on most everything, right?
Yes, as I said, the only other thing that I know Disney is going to do that I wish other streaming services would, is that you can set an option for it to continue playing the next episode in the series, unlike some streaming services which like to shame me and ask me, "Are you really still watching?" Yes, Netflix. Yes, I am always still watching.
Okay, so that's interesting because we actually had that discussion too. So last week we mentioned and we talked about how I was watching all of these people talk about the Netherlands and some of the issues that they had. And that was actually one of the complaints they had, is that for a regular old person, not in the accessibility issues, like if they were watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they couldn't, it wasn't an autoplay to the next episode. And so they had to, forcibly go to the menu and go episode 2. Okay. And then after episode 2, they had to go back to the menu and say, okay, episode 3. Like it wasn't auto playing. And I was like, oh man, I hope they fix that because I'm too lazy. But it sounds like maybe they do have that.
We all are.
And I think it's a setting you have to turn on.
Oh, maybe that's what it is. Okay. Good to know. So good.
I'm sure I will have
Mystery
so many more
solved.
updates to this once I'm actually in there. But
Absolutely.
I was told that there is a setting that you can put on that will automatically play the next episode in the series. So
okay, well that solves that mystery then. So this was
We can sleep. We can sleep tonight.
It's been a week of worrying, and now we can actually sleep on this one, and I don't have to worry about Disney Plus coming out with a black eye on it.
Right.
That makes me happy. All right. Well, this has been super informative, and Theresa, cannot thank you enough for pulling all this awesome information together and then coming on the podcast and sharing it with us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and you totally signed up, right, at D20?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
First day.
I know. We're all going to be a mess on November 13th.
I mean, don't expect to hear from me for like the next month after that.
Yeah.
There's just too much to watch.
See, I'm just the opposite. You know, I'm going to be binging everything and then screaming on social media about how excited I am about it. Like, I just won't shut up. So...
We're going to be like, we're now streaming Patty streaming Disney Plus.
Can we just get a live cam on you for like a 24-hour?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that would be so ugly by the end of that. Like, it would actually, you know what? People will pay good money for that. So yeah, I'm going to set up a.
And this is why we have a podcast and not a video.
Amen to that. Amen to that. But yeah, I just know. I've already got like 7 things that I want to watch day one, and I'm like, that's impossible. Mm-hmm. You can't watch all 7 because by 7 things, I mean I want to watch the entire season of High School Musical, the musical, the series.
So is that one that, are they putting that entire season up at once, or is that, because I know a lot of them, they're talking about they're going to wait a week.
Right. Which
for people like us who they know would sit and cancel their lives to watch everything.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I've seen conflicting information on that, but the most updated information I saw stated that this one was going to come out all at once.
Okay.
I hold to that hope because that's the kind of person I am. However, it may not, and if it doesn't, that's good. That's still good because then that gives me time to devote to things like Lady and the Tramp and to The Mandalorian and to Jeff Goldblum. I mean,
and to Jeff, always Jeff Goldblum. I think last week I just realized that we didn't
mention
his name. Oh. We did not utter his name.
I'm glad I filled that gap.
I failed.
Today. I really hope they have audio descriptions for him.
Oh my gosh. I hope he does the audio descriptions. Could that be amazing?
Disney, if you're listening, please, there's your like golden ticket idea right there. We will all turn on audio descriptions if you have Jeff Goldblum explaining it.
They'll have like the regular track, audio description track, the Jeff Goldblum audio description track. It's its own special one.
Yes. I will choose it every time.
Can you do that like on, I don't know, is it too much to ask for every show to be on?
Yeah, let's just do that. Jeff's not busy, I'm sure. He has plenty of time.
I'm telling you, by the end of this podcast, we are going to determine that it's going to be Goldblum Plus. I'm telling you, Disney Plus, no, Goldblum Plus.
No, it's my goal to get him on this podcast as a guest. Like, that's my end game here, guys. Let's just be
That's
serious.
What we're going for. That's our hope.
I'm nominating myself as another guest for that one too. I can just be silent the whole time. I don't need to participate. He'll be like, "What's that other mic there?" Be like, "It's nothing. It's nothing at all.
It's nothing, Jeff. Don't you worry, baby."
Yeah, you're good. You just stay.
All right.
Oh man. Well, everyone, be sure to find Theresa's blog posts on the Disney Plus accessibility features on Insightful Life, and that is insightful with 2 L's, insightfullife.com. She's got everything you need to know, and she is my number one source now for all of this accessibility information. And it's not just limited to Disney Plus. She talks about a lot of things, so definitely check her out as a resource.
And we will be back next week. And thanks, Theresa. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun, as it always is with you.
All right, guys. We'll see you all again real soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.